form, digital holographic form, is the world that we're experiencing. And it's kind of interesting that when you break down how we create and perceive what we call physical reality, there is no physical reality in truth. The five senses are picking up waveform information. They turn it into electrical information, which is fed to the brain. And the brain decodes it, processes it into digital holographic information. And that digital holographic information appears to be outside of us when it's actually within us. And so the external world does not exist in physicality. What we call the external world is a waveform field of information which we're decoding. Just as you get Wi-Fi, and the computer will take that Wi-Fi information, which is nothing more than a radiation field, but it's encoded with information. That Wi-Fi field is encoded with the entire information of the internet. And a computer will tap in, connect with that Wi-Fi field, and it will put the information in the field on the screen in a totally different state to what it is in the field. And that's, see, this is one of the interesting things that as I research this, the gathering technological network and possibilities of the modern technological world are mimicking the reality that we're actually experiencing. So when people put a headset on and they put the gloves on and they put the earphones on when they're playing a virtual reality game, what that game is doing is hacking into the five senses. It's hacking into the brain. And that information is being fed to the brain. Think of the probe in the back of the people in the Matrix, outside the Matrix, and they go into the game. But what's taking them into the game is the mind. And you can see as people kind of respond, I mean, they're standing in a room. They're like in the Matrix, they're outside the Matrix, but through the mind, they go into the Matrix, they go into the virtual reality game. And it can be so real to them that they're thrashing around, even when they're in a room that's obviously not in the reality that they're experiencing at all. It's completely different. Take the headset off, oh God, back in the room again. But when it's on, it is constantly feeding information to the brain, and it's hacking into the very processes through which we create this reality. And I imagine if you put a headset on when you come out of the womb and you never take it off, what's going to be your reality? What's going to be your sense of reality? It's going to be whatever the headset is feeding your brain. And so when you go through that process of expansion of awareness, you start to tap into frequencies that are beyond the simulation. That's when you start to get it. You start to realize what the situation is. And you know, you see more and more and more about the simulation as you awaken and expand. But there comes a point where you actually are tapping into energies, consciousness, awareness beyond the simulation. And at that point, you see we're in a simulation. Even if you don't see it, then you intuitively know it. You know, just after the turn of the millennium, I said, we're in a simulation, and the limits of the simulation on our level of it, if there are other levels of it, is the speed of light. And that the speed of light appears to be the fastest speed. It's not, it's pedestrian compared with what's possible. But it seems to be the fastest speed because it's the fastest speed within the simulation. It's the limit speed of the simulation. And then in April 2021, there was an article in Scientific American where this guy, academic guy, comes out. He says he's concluded that we live in a simulation, and the limit of the simulation is the speed of light. I thought, that's interesting. I said that around 2002-3. And so what he's saying is, he's absolutely right, is that if you create a virtual reality game, then the rules that you set for that game, and you're setting them because you're creating it, are what we call the laws of physics. Mm-hmm. It's the rules of the game. But no matter what the rules of the game are, there's always a limit. And that's the processing speed of the computation. And he was linking the speed of light to the limit of the processing speed of the simulation. Mm. And he's absolutely right. And so as people awaken, they are this group that I'm talking about, getting bigger all the time. They are becoming less and less influenced. They might not know we're in a simulation. They might not have got that far, but they're becoming less and less influenced by the simulation direction. Because what they're doing is they're starting to say, instead of just following everyone else, I want to think for myself. I want to make my own decisions. So you become less and less influenced by it, even though you don't know you're in it. But if you expand your consciousness enough, you start to see that actually we are in a simulation. And that's the last thing this cult wants. It needs us in the simulation, to be in this world and of this world. So all our perceptions are coming from the stimuli of the simulation. The awakening break that. And when they break it, they start to access levels of awareness that are not influenced at all by the simulation. And that's when the whole house of cards comes down, because it loses its power over us. And, I've reached the point now where I keep it constantly in my mind that I'm in a simulation, and that I am a state of awareness outside the simulation. That's the true I. That's me.
Yes.
Because it's important, I would suggest, to kind of hold that, because what this simulation is doing is subliminally impacting on us all the time through the subconscious, the conscious mind, whatever. It's subliminally impacting upon us. And what you find with the subliminal world is that once you make the subliminal conscious, the subliminal loses its power over you. So I've used images in my books over the years where I've put the picture in the book, and there's been a subliminal image in it, something that the conscious mind can't see, but the subconscious sees it. That's what subliminals are about, manipulating the subconscious. But the point is, something like 95% of people won't see the subliminal. But once you point it out, there it is. And people see it. In other words, it's gone from the subconscious to the conscious. Every time that person sees that picture ever again, the subliminal is the first thing they see, because it's been made conscious. So this simulation is constantly subliminally directing our thoughts, directing our lives, directing our perceptions, if you're not in touch with awareness beyond it. But once you make it conscious, yes, this is a simulation, and I am consciousness beyond the simulation, then there's a completely different perceptual consciousness dynamic between you and the world that you are experiencing. And this loses its power over you absolutely massively. So we'll come to the metaverse, because this is where this connects into this. As people more and more awaken, they are creating, not least to take those not awakening deeper and deeper and deeper into the illusion, they're creating other levels of the simulation, what you could call, because it's true, a simulation within the simulation. So if you look at this smart grid, the smart grid is, which is being created by people like Elon Musk, putting up these low orbit satellites, thousands of them, to beam Wi-Fi and 5G, etc., at the Earth, because they're creating this technological, what they call cloud, and the point of the satellites is to eventually have the cloud at every inch of the planet, because the idea is to connect the human brain through artificial intelligence to the cloud, so we become a hive mind of the cloud. I mean, they're basically admitting this. Well, they are admitting it. People like Ray Kurzweil at Google, because now, like I say, it's come to sales pitching it and selling it, because they know they can't hide it anymore, because they're on the brink of bringing it in. So this smart grid, in which all technology is connected to this cloud, this internet cloud, and is controlled by it, and the Internet of Things, which is what that is moving towards what they call the Internet of Everything, which is when the human brain is also connected to the cloud. So whoever controls the cloud controls every human mind and all technology connected to the cloud, which is planned to be all technology. I mean, it's tens of billions of things already. So that is what they're doing is they're creating a simulation within a simulation, because what this cloud is doing is creating another layer, or another layer of information, another information field to which humans are attached and are influenced by. So you've got the simulation field, where you've got the infinite field, then you've got the simulation field, but now you've got the smart grid field within the simulation field, and the metaverse is another layer. That's to take your perception even out of the body and into a avatar, which is nothing more than a digital vehicle. So consciousness then is within a simulation, the smart grid, within a simulation, the metaverse, and consciousness is working through a body which is connected to the simulation and is all part of the simulation, actually. But through the body, it's now also a avatar body that's simply in cyberspace. So look at where it's going. Further and further away from expanded levels of consciousness, which is the true I. They're building layers and layers and layers of illusory, technologically generated, simulated realities to entrap us deeper and deeper and deeper into the illusion. And one aspect of this is, or one expression of this, is the woke mentality. Once upon a time, we had human labels, which were human self-identity labels, which were man, woman, religion, race. But now in the woke era, which is all funded by the billionaires at the cult, BLM is funded by the billionaires of the cult. Anyone think George Soros cares about black people? I'm going to laugh. So why is he funding BLM? Divide and rule.
Yes.
You have this this woke mentality, which what it's doing, if you look at it, because you've got this list of letters, LGBT, and it goes on and on and on and on now, where people are now self-identifying the I with the minutiae of sexual preference even. So what's happening is, from an expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be, we're coming down into who are you? I'm my sexual preference. So everything is trying to pull people into this perceptual self-identity myopia, which all these simulated illusory realities are there to entrap us in. So, you know, when people like Elon Musk come out, Elon Musk is absolutely involved in this. I mean, instead of listening to his man of the people kind of stuff, I mean, a lot of the alternative media have bought this guy. He's an absolute fraud. Just look at what he's doing. He's putting up the satellites, which are essential to creating the cloud, and thus the smart grid. He's fronting up Tesla, which is going towards autonomous cars, which is simply to make sure that the computer will decide where you go and the limits of where you can go, and not you anymore, like with a petrol engine. And he's started this company called Neuralink, which is killing lots of monkeys on the way to connecting the human brain to computers. Just look at what he's doing. Everything he's doing is serving the cult. So this is the reason I mentioned that, is when he comes out, as he did a little while ago, and he said we could be living in a simulation. It's because he knows we are. All these people know we are, these cult operatives. All these people in Silicon Valley, the major players, they know we're in a simulation. Zuckerberg's not the brightest man ever to walk the earth. I mean, just look at him. But he will know that this is a simulation, and the metaverse is part of accentuating the simulation with another level of it, of another level of illusion. You know, it's so important that people let the information be their guide and not preconceived idea, and certainly not limit where they will go and what they will say and what they will explore by how they think people will respond to them doing it. Because if you live in a prison of fearing what other people think, then you're not going to go into any of these areas that are going to bring things to the surface that we need to know about. Because you're going to say, well, even if I've kind of seen it, I can't talk about it because how will people react to me? Yes. So I'll keep my mouth shut. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, through intimidation, the prevailing simulation narrative prevails. And so crucial to actually breaking out of that prison is to lose the fear of what other people think of you, because it doesn't matter, because they'll think something else tomorrow.
Yes.
I mean, I'm the living proof of that. I mean, you know, I've been ridiculed and abused by some monumental morons. I mean, you know, if you want to meet a moron, just follow me. In the 90s, you meet them all the time, passing me in the street and laughing and pointing and all that stuff.
And if you had allowed that to happen, you wouldn't be where you are today and written, you know, the 20 plus books that you have written. Caring what other people think about us is detrimental to our expansiveness and our growth, and to breaking out of this matrix.
If you look at it, fear of what other people think is another means to impose the official narrative.
Yes.
because you simply will not challenge the official narrative, because the majority have bought it, and you don't want to go against the majority, because what will people think? What will people do and say? And so the official narrative, even though you may want to question it, doesn't get questioned. It's another form of censorship, because the worst type, the most insidious type of censorship is self-censorship, because that means there's no debate. There's nothing. What's inside you simply doesn't circulate or get debated or discussed, because you won't say it. And what happens when you go through this awakening process, you break out the 5 sense prison cell, is this demand that comes from that you come to your own conclusions rather than someone else telling you what your conclusion should be, means that you are going to speak out. You are going to speak your truth. The more you awaken, the more people speak their truth, because the less concern they have about what other people think. Because, you know, the greatest way of suppressing and submitting humanity, getting them to submit, is to delete their self-respect.
Yes.
Once your self-respect's gone, there's nothing left but submission. It's self-respect that stops you submitting. It's self-respect that stopped people having the jab, that stopped people following the guidelines of the COVID hoax. I went through the whole thing. I never did any of it. Nothing, not one little tiny thing did I do in that whole period that I was supposed to do. I wouldn't do it. And so, again, when you open this and you go into these expanded levels of consciousness, it doesn't mean you're Buddha, you know, cross-legged on a mountain or under a tree. It's our natural state. It's how we all should be. Yeah. We're in an unnatural state because it's been artificially suppressed. Yes. So we don't express that natural state. It's the whole point of the manipulation. And so once you open your heart, once you start to expand your awareness to levels of frequency that are beyond the simulation and its influence, you stop looking at consequences for doing what you know to be right. Because to look at consequences is to consider not doing what you know to be right. And you know, anyone that wants to stand up and challenge this evil will be able to list a series of potential consequences for why they probably shouldn't do it. And the list gets long enough and people say, well, I'd like to do it, but not that badly. Whereas you reach levels of awareness, levels of self-identity, where consequences don't matter anymore. Mm. I'm doing what I know to be right, and that's it. There is no other conversation to be had. It's right to do this. It's right to say this. So I'm going to do it and say it. And that's when, you know, no level of ridicule, no level of abuse will stop you saying it and doing it. Because fearing abuse and ridicule for doing and saying something, that's a perceived consequence which stops people doing it. Well, you don't perceive consequences because you don't even consider them. It's right, so I'm doing it. Then yes. Ridicule and abuse have no effect on you whatsoever. And I can tell you that from experience. There's no level of abuse. There's no level of ridicule. There's no level of threat or alleged intimidation that will stop me doing what I know to be right. It just won't happen. I'd rather die than do that.
I love it. I love it. It's so important for us to, you know, free ourselves from the chains of what other people think about us and, you know, speak the truth I think it's our divine right, once we've awakened to what's going on, to bring that information into the world so as to wake up the rest of our brothers and sisters in realizing that, we are the majority and we are the ones who are holding ourselves back by allowing the few at the top to control us.
Exactly. And it's very simple. It's just a system of imposition and acquiescence, Each perceived superior level in the hierarchy imposes, and the level below it acquiesces and then imposes on the level below them. That's how the whole deal works. So you've got your people in your luminous jackets who seem to be breeding overnight. Luminous jackets are everywhere. And their perceived bosses tell them what to do and how to behave in relation to the public, and so they do. And their bosses are told by their bosses, and their bosses are told by their bosses. And it's a hierarchy of imposition and acquiescence, which comes eventually down to the bottom of the pyramid in the hierarchy, where you have the mass of the population. And if we acquiesce at that level to those levels that are imposing upon us, like governments and law enforcement and all these people, then we have completed a circuit between the top of the pyramid, which is the inner core of this cult, globally and nationally, to the bottom of the pyramid, which is the mass of humanity. We've completed a circuit of imposition, acquiescence, that if we acquiesce as a population, that circuit has imposed upon the entire human population of getting on for 8 billion people what a handful of people at the top of the top of the pyramid have dictated. And that inner core of the cult, you would get into a single room. And yet through this imposition acquiescence technique, they impose their will on billions and billions of people. And if people say, well, they can't do that, well, the COVID era, I rest my case.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, David, for that, for standing up to your truth. And in doing so, you have opened my eyes and a lot more, thousands, millions of other eyes, and have awakened us to what is really going on in the world and how we can, stand in our sovereignty and stand in our truth and, really stand in our powers, realizing that we are the power, and this just no more in accepting what is being told to us and accepting that we are seeing reality through our 5 senses, which we're not, that we're consciousness, we are the great I having human experiences. And it is our divine right to live in that truth and be able to see our kids and grandchildren live in their truth as well. So thank you. My next question is how do we reclaim our sovereignty and really be able to say enough is enough? How do we reclaim our sovereignty and step out of the stories that are being told to us for the ones that are still, asleep? What is it that you want to say to them to wake them up?
Well, the ones who are asleep are asleep. And the only people that can wake up asleep people are asleep people. What you can do is put information out there, and those who have ears will hear, and those who haven't yet won't. And I think this is important because I meet a lot of people, I do understand it, who get terribly frustrated that their family won't get it, or people they know won't get it, the friends won't get it. But what's the point of becoming frustrated? You put information out there, and people that are affected by it will be affected by it, and people who hurl abuse as a result of it will do that. So it's just a matter of doing everything you can, and not getting pulled into all the emotion and frustration of it, because that ain't going to do anything. It's just going to pull you down. And it's one of the things that when you break out of the 5 sense prison, you find a sense of security, and secure people are at peace with how things are. They say things like, it is what it is. It doesn't mean they accept what it is. They do everything they can to make the is nicer, more enlightened, if you like, but they accept it is what it is. And they don't get frustrated when it's not what they'd like it to be. Continue to work towards that, but you know, we can get pulled into low frequency states trying to express high frequency states. It's very easy to fall into it.
That is true, especially when you care so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's not about caring or not caring. It's about doing what you can and being at peace that you've done what you can, and therefore not to get frustrated that it's not had necessarily the effect with some people that you like it to have. You see, I have this this philosophy on life, which has been very useful over a lot of years, well, many years, decades. And that's, I don't do things to help people, right? Because if you do things with the motivation of helping people, then when they turn on you, they invariably do, a lot of them, you become hurt and almost resentful. You know, I've tried to help you and you treat me like this. I do things because I believe them to be right. And in the process, people are helped. But I'm doing it because I believe it to be right. And that's my motivation. So when people turn on you, you don't say, well, how can you do that? You know, I've tried to help you. Because no, I did what I did because I believed it to be right.
I like that.
And the fact that you've, you know, turned on me having done that, well, that's fine, because I've not done it. I've not personalized it with you. I'm doing it because I believe it to be right. And it's a completely different way of interacting with the world. So, you know, you do what you know to be right, or you believe to be right, in putting information in front of people. But you don't take it personally when they reject it. Because, you know, if we believe in freedom, and I do, then people must have the freedom to reject what you say, or otherwise it's not freedom. My motivation is not to persuade people that what I'm saying is right. They have to decide that. It's to say, here's another way of looking at the world. Here's another way of looking at this situation, this event, this happening, that's different to what you're being told through the mainstream and the authorities. Here's another way of possibly looking at it. But once I've done that, whether people look at it or don't is entirely up to them. And I'm completely at peace with that. It is what it is.
I like that. I absolutely like that. You're doing it because you know it to be right, and not caring what other people think, you know, about what you're doing, but you're doing it because this is what you know to be right. I absolutely love that. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working on getting to a place in my life where I sincerely do not care what other people think about me, and be able to, you know, rise above the fear and rise above, you know, the level of criticism that I know is out there. So tell us about your next book. I do know that this book, the Perceptions of a Renegade Mind, is continuing to open my mind, and it is continuing to shift my paradigm. It's a masterpiece. And I just want to encourage anyone who wants to know, what is going on in the world, and, with the current state that it is right now, especially with the COVID, to pick up this book. You can get it from David's website or from Amazon. So David, tell us about your next book.
Well, it goes into very deep levels of the trap, how the trap works, what the trap is, and how we can escape from the illusions of the trap, because the trap is simply the selling of illusion. And there are other levels of this simulation, not just the level of what we call the physical world. There are other levels too. And it's, I came across this, obviously a long time ago, this whole idea of reincarnation. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that at all. My question is, and always has been, is if you look at the size of, even if you take mainstream science, if you look at the size of the planet Earth against the perceived projected size of the universe, then planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. So my question was, and continues to be, why do you have to keep reincarnating onto a planet a billionth of a pinhead over and over and over again to learn the lessons that stop you having to do it? Makes no sense.
Wow.
But if there are other levels of the simulation to continue the entrapment of consciousness when it leaves the body, then it makes absolute sense. Because what you're doing is reincarnating over and over again into a simulation, into one level of the simulation, this one, from other levels of the simulation. And so what I've done in across a great range of subjects over the decades is I've looked at ancient and modern and seen where the common themes are, because I'm always looking for patterns. I'm always looking for common themes, not least ancient and modern, because this ain't just happened. So it must have been talked about in the ancient world as well. And it absolutely is what you find. And you are supposed to see, in almost every, if not every, ancient culture, belief system, religion, there's this thing about learning and evolving and all that. And if you go into the more esoteric kind of religions and cultures, it's about raising your frequency to escape the cycle of reincarnation, the vicious circle. And there's an esoteric concept, an old esoteric concept called the ring pass not. And that is perceived to be a barrier which you can only cross if you have reached a certain level of frequency. In other words, enlightenment of perception and enlightenment of self-identity. And if you don't reach it, then you remain entrapped inside it until you reach that frequency level through enlightenment, as they call it, to leave. You look at the various reincarnation religions, and that's what they're telling you. But this is an esoteric concept they call the ring pass not. But it's also, you've got some talk about the Ouroboros and the snake that's swallowing its own tail, and that's symbolized as the limit that keeps you inside. Mm-hmm. So suddenly reincarnation starts to make more sense, that you're not reincarnating onto a planet the size of a pinhead. You're actually reincarnating from one level of the simulation into this level of the simulation. And the idea is to keep you inside and outside of this in a state of perception, thus frequency, that stops you escaping the frequency walls, the prison walls of the simulation in all its forms, this ring pass not, if you like. And so if you when you leave the body, your perception is that you have to keep coming back. The perception of your mind, as opposed to your expanded consciousness, that you have to keep coming back to learn more lessons, to evolve and be free of the cycle, then that becomes your perception of reality, as much as this becomes your perception of reality when you're at this level of the simulation. And so it's vital that we hold, I mentioned this already, we hold this self-identity that we are consciousness, infinite awareness beyond the simulation, and that is the I. Because any other I is going to hold you in a state of imprisonment. The five senses of the human body are going to imprison you in this level of the simulation. And your perception of reincarnation is going to hold you in that level of the simulation. As long as you are not self-identifying with being all that is, has been, and ever can be, you are in some form of perceptual limitation. And that perceptual limitation expresses itself as a frequency limitation, thus entrapment within the frequency field bubble, if you like, of this multi-level simulation. But the thing is, like I said earlier, if you self-identify with little me, you will create little me, because you become little me. Your self-identity dictates what you connect with, because it's dictating your frequency. So if we self-identify with the body, as opposed to being a vehicle for an experience of the true I, then the limitations of the body become the limitations of the perception of the I, become the limitations of the frequency field that we're generating and operating on. If you go to the level of you are a soul, then, and you have to keep reincarnating to evolve, because that's what the other levels of the simulation are feeding you when you leave the body through the tunnel and all that, then that's going to be your sense of reality, and that's going to be your sense of limitation. And it's going to be what you attach to. The level of awareness that you attach to is the level of awareness that you self-identify with.
That is powerful.
If you can just hold this self-identity that I am a point of attention within all that is, has been, and ever can be, and potentially my attention, point of attention, can be all that is, has been, and ever can be, that I am a state of awareness. I am a state of being aware. I'm not a body. I'm not a soul. I am awareness, and potentially all awareness. That connects you to that level of awareness. It doesn't matter if you're in a body or whether you're reincarnating or whatever. That self identity, if we can hold it and not get pulled in, will attach you, will connect you. It has to, because what you self-identify as, you will connect with in terms of frequency. And so then when you leave the body, you'll be out of here. Because you will not be on a level of frequency, thus perception, which becomes your frequency, your self-identity, which becomes your frequency. That can be stopped by any simulation. You know, it's like 2 radio stations. You're out of here. There is no limit once you be. There is no limit once you become a self-identity of no limit.
I love it. I love the way that you just broke it down, in the way we're identifying ourselves is creating that, that loop that we find ourselves in, keep coming back reincarnated. And it's so important, like you said, for us to self-identify as consciousness, not having a gender, not having a title, not having, nothing, just a pure awareness who is having an experience, but not attaching that awareness to the experience. Hopefully I'm doing you justice and trying to explain it over again.
See, this is one of the things, you see, is that people hand over responsibility for reality and the I to people they consider to be cleverer than them. So they will hand over responsibility for telling us what reality is to scientists, the great majority of which haven't got a bloody clue what reality is. They're still stuck in the 5 cents prison cell. That's why science is overwhelmingly, apart from, in some areas, but overwhelmingly, it's about the world of solidity and the world of physicality, the world of biology and all this stuff. It's because they're stuck in the 5 senses. There was the famous Plato analogy, about the cave, when he was using it as a symbol for reality. And it was prisoners in chains in a cave, so they could only see one wall. And behind them, they couldn't see it, was a fire. And behind them, there were people and there were animals walking past. And because of the fire, their shadows were cast on the wall. Now, these prisoners could only see that wall. So the shadows on the wall were now their sense of reality. And Plato says that some of these prisoners became experts on the shadows on the wall. And they are today's scientists and academics. They're studying the shadows on the wall, thinking it's reality. So
they have no clue.
The point is, and to maintain their careers, they need to keep saying that. So what I'm saying is, don't fall for the complexity, because once people see something as complex, they don't think that they could possibly understand it. So they hand over responsibility for understanding it, which is then told to them what they should understand it as, to people they think are clever and can understand complexity, which is scientists and academics who, talk about the blind leading the bloody blind. And yet, the genius is not in understanding complexity. It's seeing the simple hidden by complexity. So the foundation of life and how it works is dead simple. But as it plays out, it appears to be complex. because of all the different expressions of this simple situation. And the simple situation is what you self-identify as, you connect with.
Mm.
And so if you self-identify with limitation, you will connect with limitation, you will experience limitation. And if you, like I say, self-identify with being that all it is, has been, and ever can be, then you will connect with that, and it will influence your perceptions, your understandings, your insights, your intuitive knowing. And that's the whole simple foundation. What you believe, you perceive, and what you perceive, you experience. And then from that simple perception becomes experience foundation, becomes all these different perceptions and all these different experiences as a result of the perception. And that's where everything seems so complex. And oh my God, I don't understand it. Get a scientist in here, right? But that complexity is just the playing out of the deadly simple. And if we can go to the deadly simple, then we take control of our lives.